Reuter Road East, Oklahoma. To most, it seems like any other rural road with nothing going on. A straight line off into the distance in the flatlands of Oklahoma. For those interested in weather, this road is known for a memorial site. A memorial site remembering the lives lost during the worst disaster in storm chasing history. An event that 10 years ago cemented itself in the record books for plenty of reasons. That event was the 2013 Reno Tornado. On May 31st, 2013, a large and powerful tornado tore across rural central Oklahoma. The tornado, over the course of 40 minutes, would cement itself in the history books, breaking the record for the largest tornado in recorded history with a peak width of 2.6 miles. The tornado would already be notable in of itself because of its size, but it's what the tornado took from the world that left a massive scar in the storm chasing community. Numerous storm chasers were caught off guard and hit by the Reno tornado due to its rapid widening and unpredictable changes in its movement, leaving some with minor or major injuries. But for 4 of the storm chasers caught in the path of the tornado, they were not so lucky. 3 of those 4 chasers were well known in the community for their dedication to meteorology and chasing. The TWISTEX Team, Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young, died in the tornado. Another less-known chaser, Richard Charles Henderson, also died. The TWISTEX Team was one of the most well-respected chaser teams in the nation, due to their dedication to storm chasing and meteorology, in a pursuit to better understand tornadoes. At the time of recording, it has been nearly 10 years since the Reno 2013 tornado, and given the recent number of chasing incidents this year, it's more important now than ever to take a deep dive into the deadliest accident in storm chasing history. I'll be giving some context before the event, the synopsis, the event itself, the aftermath, and the legacy, controversy, and importance of the event. Welcome to Nature's Fury. Before taking a deep dive into the Reno tornado, it's important to provide context to what the state of mind was for both chasers and those in Oklahoma alike. And for Oklahoma residents, they were still in shock and awe at what happened 11 days prior. On May 20th, 2013, an EF5 tornado tore through Moore, Oklahoma. To many in the state and the nation as a whole, the images coming out of Moore after the tornado left people speechless. Those in the Oklahoma City metro had their anxiety through the roof when it came to severe weather. They were no stranger to it, but knowing what had occurred and that more severe weather was to be expected, many in the area were worried. Chasers, on the other hand, were having the time of their lives regarding the activity during the last 2 weeks of May. With the exception of a span of days from May 21st through the 26th, storm chasers had a setup to chase almost every day, leaving very little room to breathe. On the 27th, a large EF3 tornado tore across the open fields of Kansas to the south of Salem. The next day, 2 strong tornadoes touched down in the state. An EF3 tornado to the west of Corning, Kansas, and a large, strong EF3 tornado to the west of Bennington, Kansas, with an extremely strange track. Many chasers were out and about during the various tornado events during that May, including the Dominator team featuring Reed Timmer, the Tornado Hunt 2013 vehicle and 2 other vehicles in the fleet featuring Mike Bettis, members of the K4 TV news station in Oklahoma City, meteorologist Emily Sutton and storm chaser Kevin Josephy, and the TWISTEX Team, featuring Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young. The TWISTEX Team was more than just a storm chaser team. While yes, the team did catch footage of tornadoes, the main point of the project was for weather research. The purpose of the TWISTEX Team was to better understand tornado generation, maintenance, and decay processes, and to gain insight and knowledge of what goes on inside a tornado. The reasoning for said research was to increase tornado warning time and to provide ground data for structural engineering analysis of the interactions between tornadic winds and constructed homes. The TWISTEX team used a mobile mesonet station mounted on the roofs of their vehicles and placed down thermodynamic probes ahead of tornadoes to record and store datasets such as atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, wind speed, and direction in order to gather data. The TWISTEX team, headed by Tim Samaras, was extremely important for tornado research, especially in 2013. But come the 31st of May, things would not be the same. But real quick, the majority of people who like these videos are not subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy what I create, consider subscribing. It helps the channel and tells me I'm doing something right. Anyways, back to the 2013 El Reno tornado. On May 31st, both a strong mid to upper level trough that had tracked across the plains over the previous few days, and a closed mid-level low pressure system slowly moved to the east-northeast. A strong belt of flow was located along the trough in the Midwest and in the southern plains. A shortwave trough was located in the Texas Panhandle and slowly moved across into Oklahoma on the 31st. A prominent surface cyclone was centered on the North Dakota-South Dakota border, with fronts spanning from Minnesota through the plains. Ahead of the cold front in the southern plains was a dry line spanning from western Oklahoma and southward into Texas, and a surface low over northwestern Texas. A triple point was observed, where the surface front met with a dry line over west central Oklahoma, and that was where the greatest potential for severe weather was expected to occur. During the morning, a capping inversion was in place over Oklahoma. A moderately strong polar jet moved to the east-northeast from the southern Rocky Mountains and into the southern Great Plains. A low-level jet was expected to kick in around 6 to 7 p.m. In order to get a better understanding of how the El Reno tornado came to be and what went down on the ground as it was happening, I spoke to Reed Timmer, a well-known storm chaser and meteorologist who chased the El Reno tornado. When it came down to the synopsis, he told me that the ingredients were in place for a mega wedge tornado. You're a meteorologist, you probably know how to explain this better than I do. What was the environment like that May 31st? Because one of the things I remember, because I watched the Tornado Chasers episode on it, so I could actually remember what happened that day. Because I was 10. So,
wow.
You mentioned that it seemed like it could have been worse than the 20th. So just what's your insight on what you were seeing and what was happening in the atmosphere that morning?
Well, the 19th and 20th were particularly bad, and those were high-end setups. You knew that they were going to go big. The 19th, it was pretty obvious, was going to be a big regional tornado outbreak in Oklahoma, Kansas, other parts of the southern plains. So, but the setup on May 31st was a little bit different. It was one of those washed out outflow boundaries where you get those west-east oriented boundaries that destabilize to the north of it. So you have that general belt of low-level easterly winds beneath, fairly strong zonal flow and a ton of instability, deep moisture. And just a couple of days before that, we had a very similar setup in Bennington, Kansas, where you also had those easterly winds. You had a very unstable setup. You had a boundary that was there, a general belt of low-level easterly winds. Anytime you get those low-level easterlies at the surface and up to about a kilometer or two underneath those strong westerly winds with a lot of instability, it's almost like a high plains kinematic setup where it's post-frontal and you have those easterly winds up to 2 kilometers beneath the strong mid-level westerlies, except you have Great Plains moisture and a lot of instability. So it's kind of the perfect setup to get those really strong, slow-moving tornadoes that are particularly strong and also kind of a characteristic of the Great Plains. And the Chapman, Kansas EF4 tornado was similar to that one, a little bit more fast moving, even more favorable kinematics in the upper troposphere with a larger scale trough that was coming in. But anytime you get those deep easterlies at the low levels and you kind of have an outflow boundary and a boundary that destabilizes, similar to Pilger 2014, those 3 days of setups, except further north in the Central Plains, you know that those are going to go big. And El Reno was definitely one of those setups where you had a ton of cape, You had the low-level easterlies and certainly strong flow aloft to support supercell storms. And you just knew that it was going to be the classic setup for the mega wedge, which are basically those wedges that are wider than about 1.5 miles.
But what about specific numbers? Winds at the 850 millibar level were low, at least during the afternoon near El Reno. But as the El Reno tornado touched down, the low-level jet kicked in, and storm relative helicity and wind shear began to rapidly grow, with storm relative helicity reaching around 200 meters squared per second squared. At the 700 millibar level, winds were around 35 to 40 knots in association with a shortwave trough that moved across Oklahoma. Winds at the 500 millibar level ranged from 40 to 50 knots across central Oklahoma, with stronger values observed to the north. Typically, low amounts of low-level shear would create problems for supercells, as they would normally struggle to develop low-level mesocyclones. However, that wasn't an issue due to the insane amount of CAPE and instability in the area. Surface CAPE across Oklahoma was over 3,000 joules per kilogram, with areas observing CAPE exceeding 5,000 joules per kilogram in central Oklahoma. Mixed layer CAPE was also high, with values being in excess of 4,000 joules per kilogram. 3 CAPE was extremely high, reaching near 200 joules per kilogram in the afternoon hours. The 3 CAPE being so high was crucial for tornadoes to develop in the absence of low-level shear, even as the low-level jet kicked in. Dew points were high, with those being in the 60s and 70s, and temperatures were high as well, with those being in the 80s. Storms were expected to begin as discrete supercells before upscaling into a line as the storms continued into eastern Oklahoma. The event was a high CAPE, low shear event, and the ingredients were in place for the potential of a few strong to violent tornadoes with large hail. A Day 2 moderate risk was issued for northern Oklahoma and portions of Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas, and on the 31st, a Day 1 moderate risk was issued for Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. A 15 sig Tor threat was issued for those areas, alongside a 30 sig wind and a 45 sig hail. A 60 sig hail was issued for Oklahoma during the 20Z outlook. At 3:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch was issued for central Oklahoma, with a 90% chance of 2 or more tornadoes, with a 70% chance of 1 or more strong tornadoes, a 90% chance of 10 or more severe wind events, and a greater than 95% chance for 10 or more severe hail events with a 90% chance of 1 or more hailstones larger than 2 inches in diameter. Locals in Oklahoma were aware and more anxious than ever thanks to the Moore tornado, and with the severe wording regarding the chances of tornadoes for the day, many were simply praying that there wouldn't be a repeat of what happened on May 20th. Beginning at 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, a quasi-linear complex of thunderstorms began to develop to the west of Oklahoma City. The storms, located near the triple point, immediately began to blow up in size and became robust supercells. Since the thunderstorms were very close to each other, the radar presentation looked very messy for the majority of those storms. As the storms began to fire, storm chasers in the OKC metro area began to head west towards El Reno, Oklahoma to chase storms. All eyes were on the southernmost supercell, as the southern cell was away from the cluttered mess that were the storms to the north. As time progressed, the southernmost cell became more organized, and at 5:53 p.m., a tornado warning was issued. Chasers who were positioned in El Reno began to make the journey to the south to track the tornado. Reed Timmer and those in the Dominator 2 were positioned to the west of where the tornado would touch down. Many storm chasers were located to the north and east of the circulation. A large wall cloud was clearly visible within the high precipitation supercell, and it was only a matter of time before a tornado would touch down. And at 6:03 p.m., it happened. At 6:03 p.m., the El Reno tornado touched down to the north of Reno Road West, and almost immediately the characteristics of the tornado were odd. Regarding its structure, From the west, numerous subvortices were observed within the main tornado itself as observed by Reed Timmer, and the tornado was completely wrapped in rain. But the tornado was much larger than it seemed, and would continue to grow in width as time progressed. But the more unusual characteristic was where it was heading. The tornado was traveling to the southeast. Typically, tornadoes move towards the northeast, but this time was different. The Reno Tornado was traveling to the southeast, and would then eventually travel in a more easterly direction. The tornado crossed Reno Road West at 6:07 p.m., and the first chaser incident occurred just as it began to trek eastward. Brandon Sullivan and Brett Wright were first impacted. They were located just to the south of Reno Street as the tornado began to move in a more easterly direction. However, due to the low visibility and heavy rain-wrapped nature of the tornado, they headed south, as the tornado was still moving to the east-southeast. The two storm chasers escaped the tornado's center, but were still impacted by the tornado's circulation and strong winds. Reed's team did a hook-slice maneuver to remain to the north of the tornado after it crossed Reno Road West. The tornado was producing minimal damage at this point, mainly because it was over open fields where barely anyone lived. The tornado crossed South Airport Road, barely missing El Reno Regional Airport, and the TWISTEX crew as they headed to the north. The tornado passed within 1/10 of a mile of the TWISTEX crew. As it passed the road, the tornado produced EF3 damage. As the tornado was moving mostly to the east before reaching near Route 81, many chasers began positioning themselves to the northeast of the tornado, such as Mike Bettis and the TWISTEX team. Mike and his team positioned themselves along US Route 81. The TWISTEX team would cross the highway and head along Reuter Road. Reed was behind the storm and on Reno Road. Then, the Dominator got caught in power lines, and the hood of the Dominator was ripped off and went away with the wind, never to be found again.
And shortly after we got to the storm, it started producing that large tornado. And it touched down as a multiple vortex, too. The El Reno tornado began with the same personality that it had throughout its life cycle. It was a large multiple vortex wedge, a very large tornado cyclone, too. And there were baseballs and softballs that were falling out of the bear's cage. And I usually like to chase tornadoes by doing what's called a hook slice maneuver, where you approach the tornado from the rear, you go through the hook in the rain, and it doesn't always set up perfectly like this. But this El Reno tornado set up perfectly for me to do a hook slice maneuver because it's a relatively slow moving tornado. The hook didn't have a ton of precipitation in it, so you could actually see the tornado from behind as well. But when you do the hook slice maneuver like that, you kind of allow those deviant tornado paths, like when they make a left-hand turn, you can just allow that to happen right in front of you. And basically you can stop, that's an escape route, and just allow that left-hand turn to happen right in front of you. And that's basically what happened in the Dominators, but it was kind of forced because we ended up running into power lines right when we were coming through the hook of that storm. We were kind of in the western edge of the tornado, and we ended up running into power lines, and it wrapped around the hood of the Dominator. And just to free ourselves, we had to back up to the Dominator, and it tightened up the power lines that were wrapped around the hood, and then it shot the hood out like a frisbee into the tornado, and we never were able to find that hood again. We think that it actually went airborne and possibly never hit the ground.
Both Bettis and the TWISTEX team were located to the north and to the east of the tornado, in the bear's cage. Being to the northeast of a tornado is usually very dangerous, because tornadoes are subject to deviant motion, where tornadoes begin to track further north than to the east. Deviant motion is more common in slow-moving tornadoes, because the faster the tornado is moving, the less likely the tornado is subject to drastic changes in its direction. There were escape routes, but in the bear's cage, the options were to hook slice the cell, go north and get battered by the hail core, or go south or east and hopefully make it to the other side before the tornado hits you. More often than not, chasers prefer to go south or east to escape the tornado if they are in the bear's cage. But in the case of El Reno, that was a decision that would have multiple chasers see their lives flash before their very own eyes. Around 6:20 p.m., the tornado was moving nearly due east, and Bettis and his team felt like they were in an unsafe position. Going to the north was not an option due to satellite interference because of the hail core, as there was a satellite truck that was accompanying the team. So, the team headed to the south of the tornado to try and escape, but the team ended up being hit near the center of where the tornado was located around 6:20 p.m. The first vehicle of the fleet was pulled into a ditch. The satellite truck behind the main vehicle did not move off of the road. But the primary tornado hunt vehicle, where Mike Bettis was thrown hundreds of yards away, and the vehicle rolled over and over again. In a Weather Channel special, Mike said that he felt weightless, floating in the vehicle, all as Brett Reynolds' camera caught the disaster inside the car, before the camera fell out of the car, filming the car rolling in an open field. It wasn't over, as 150-mile-per-hour wind gusts rushed through the car. A minute went by of the ferocious winds before Bettis could see the tornado through the window. The Weather Channel headquarters in Atlanta called Bettis over and over again to try and get a response, but they got no response, until the crew got out of the mangled vehicle and got into another car to seek medical attention. As it crossed US Route 81, the worst-case scenario began to play out for those to the northeast of the tornado. The tornado was already hard to see because it wasn't completely consolidated before this point, and due to the rain-wrapped nature of the tornado. But then, the tornado began to turn to the northeast. This already is an issue for those in the path of the tornado. But as the tornado was moving to the northeast, the tornado widened out to its widest point, going from roughly a mile to 1.5 miles wide to its peak width of 2.6 miles in a short amount of time. The tornado's forward motion increased sharply from roughly 20 miles per hour to 55 miles per hour. Not to mention that the rain bands did not lead to a narrow corridor of clean air, but rather the rotating curtains of rain was the outer circulation of the tornado itself. As the TWISTEX crew crossed US Route 81, they questioned whether or not they should continue heading east, but they went ahead anyway. A mile to the east of Route 81, they realized that they are right in the tornado's path. At 6:23 p.m., the TWISTEX team was hit by the tornado, thrown and rolled several times as they were overtaken by the tornado's cyclone, and then an intense subvortex near the tornado's center. A little bit to the east, Dan Robinson narrowly escaped being hit by the inner circulation of the tornado. During the tornado's left-hand turn, K4 meteorologist Emily Sutton and storm chaser Kevin Josephy were also in the path, with their vehicle being hit by debris from the tornado. At 6:28 p.m., a tornado emergency was issued for Yukon, Richland, Wiley Post Airport, Bethany, The Village, and eastern El Reno, and the tornado was now expected to go into the Oklahoma City metro directly. Many people who were in the area began rushing onto highways to try to escape the tornado. It was utter chaos, as cars began going southbound in the northbound lanes, and people were running for their lives. At roughly the same time the tornado emergency was issued, an unusually strong anticyclonic satellite tornado formed to the southeast of the primary tornado, and remained on the ground for 15 minutes before lifting at 6:43. While the primary El Reno tornado was on the ground, a mobile radar found that the tornado had winds of approximately 135 meters per second, or roughly 302 miles per hour. The primary tornado continued to move to the north, and proceeded to cross I-40 at around 6:30 p.m. with the tornado's center stalling to the north. The tornado's center slowly moved across and along I-40 before lifting at 6:43 p.m. Thankfully, over the portion of I-40 that the tornado crossed, there seemed to be few cars located there, with all the traffic jams being located away from where the tornado crossed I-40. Although, 2 people died as the tornado was over the interstate. The Reno Tornado had peak winds of 302 miles per hour, with a peak width of 2.6 miles. The tornado traveled 16.2 miles over the course of 40 minutes, killing 8, injuring 151, and causing roughly $35 to $40 million in damages. While the tornado itself had lifted, the threat of dangerous weather was far from over. The supercell produced a few more tornadoes in Oklahoma City, outside of the anticyclonic tornado. However, the vast majority were weak, with most of them being rated EF1. Large hail was plentiful with the thunderstorms that day, with multiple hail reports to the west and around Oklahoma City. Strong wind gusts were also reported. The biggest threat now for the OKC metro area was flooding. From the evening hours of the 31st and through the early morning hours on June 1st, storms trained into the metro area. 7 to 12 inches of rain fell in the area, leading to flash flood warnings being issued, as now the OKC metro area was flooded. Far and away from Oklahoma, 2 EF3 tornadoes touched down and impacted the St. Louis, Missouri area. But in Oklahoma, many were now afraid of what the damage could have looked like after the tornado. But thankfully, due to the tornadoes staying over mostly the middle of nowhere, the financial damages were not as catastrophic as they could have been. When it came to the damage, the tornado did not affect the heavily populated areas of the Oklahoma City metro area, barely missing them. But the houses that were hit did suffer major damage. Off of South Airport Road, multiple brick homes sustained EF3 damage as the exterior walls had collapsed. A house off of Southwest 15th Street had all of its walls collapsed. A Walmart off of East US Highway 66 sustained major damage, and a building next to it also suffered EF3 damage. A metal building off of I-40 also suffered EF3 damage. The majority of the buildings the tornado hit were mobile homes, especially near the end of its life. Many other instances of EF3 damage were found, but no images were attached to those indicators on the damage assessment toolkit. But the majority of the pain regarding the aftermath came from the lives lost and the impacts to the storm chasing community. Reed Timmer, as he came onto Route 81, he saw a vehicle over in an open field and recognized it. It was the tornado hunt vehicle.
Yeah, and I remember seeing a vehicle crinkled up, and I instantly recognized it as the Weather Channel vehicle. They were doing a show, I believe, out there during that whole season, and so we saw the vehicle throughout the storm season. And right when we were coming north-south, you just saw that vehicle that was rolled, and I instantly remember, oh no, that's Mike Bettis and crew, and we ran out in the field, and they came out of their vehicle, and it seemed like they were in shock because they were okay. It was almost like they were fine, you know, they were almost happy, even smiling a bit. A lot of times that happens when you come into these tornado damage paths and somebody was just rolled, for example. A lot of times they'll have a smile on their face and blood streaming down their face, and they'll kind of be out of it a little bit in shock. And with the Weather Channel crew, it seemed like they were totally fine too. They were having full conversations with us. Even the camera operator that had broken his back, I think, was in shock and the pain hadn't yet set in. And in the days after that, of course, he was in the hospital for a long time, and then it became more serious. But yeah, just seeing your friends, you know, but you see them, you're instantly worried, and then suddenly you see them and you're like, okay, they're all right. And then, you know, kind of having that emotional roller coaster is something that's intense, but it's also uniquely a part of storm chasing, because anytime you're on the backside of these tornadoes, a lot of times you encounter damage paths, you see vehicles that are crinkled up. Sometimes they're people that are in the path of the storm. You see locals that are coming out and emerging from the rubble. They're trying to help out the best you can. Everything happens so fast. But in this situation, seeing somebody that you know, it definitely is a very intense experience that you don't want to have repeated ever again. So it definitely was a terrible experience, and but I'm just glad that they're okay. And I'm glad that Mike Bettis is still doing weathercast to this day on the Weather Channel, and still a friend of mine as well to this day. And definitely was a unique tornado, though, that did that left-hand turn, really rode that low-level jet as it turned off to the left. And that's also kind of a characteristic of these setups where you have those easterly winds at the low levels, relative, a little bit more modest mid and upper tropospheric flow, but it's still sufficiently strong to generate supercell storms in a bulk sense. But they're moving a little bit more slowly. And a lot of times you get those tornadoes that do the left-hand turn and kind of ride that low-level jet off to the left and show that deviant motion. And so those tornadoes are particularly strong. And a lot of times they do have that left-hand turn as well, which makes them a little bit more dangerous to chase from a storm chaser perspective.
For those who had chased, nobody that day could have guessed as to why the El Reno tornado would be remembered so infamously to this day. As people woke up the next day, the nation was left in shock. In fact, the main reason why people remember the TWISTEX team, for those who don't follow storm chasing, is what happened on May 31st. The TWISTEX team had gotten into their Chevrolet Cobalt for the final time and chased. The news the following morning shattered everyone's heart. The TWISTEX team, Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young, died during the El Reno tornado, alongside an amateur storm chaser, Richard Henderson. And the chasers who survived, they were now scarred for life.
CNN confirming this morning that 3 of them died on Friday while pursuing the tornado in Oklahoma City. They are Tim Samaras, who worked with the Discovery Channel program Storm Chasers, his son, Paul Samaras, and their colleague, Carl Young.
Running the twister, but Tim and his team did not survive. Tim was found seatbelted in his car. The others apparently pulled from the car by the tornado.
At times, I have mixed feelings about chasing these storms. On one hand, they are incredibly beautiful. On the other hand, these powerful storms can create devastating damage that change people's lives forever.
The storm chasing community before this point had never, ever had this happen. Storm chasing was insanely dangerous. Yet, before 2013, no known deaths were attributed to storm chasers because of a storm they were chasing. Paul and Carl were found out in the open field, ejected from the vehicle, while Tim was still in his seat. Tim was one of the smartest people in the field of meteorology, and was extremely important towards the efforts to further understand how tornadoes work on the inside. The data they were collecting was helping people get a better understanding of how tornadoes work, and now he, alongside his son and Carl Young, died doing what they loved, chasing storms and collecting scientific data. For Mike Bettis' crew, while they survived, they were now scarred. The driver of the tornado hunt vehicle, Austin, was hospitalized after breaking his ribs and cracking some vertebrae in his neck. Mike and the others in the vehicle sustained only minor injuries. Mike swore off storm chasing after the event, giving an emotional testimony to the Weather Channel.
I just saw my wife's face, and I thought, that's my life, and I don't want to give that up just yet, and thankfully I don't have to.
To many in the chasing community, heartache was apparent throughout, including for Reed.
It didn't yet in real time because that I actually didn't find out about the TWISTEX crew until the next day. So I wasn't as worried about chasers being impacted. And, a lot of times back then, there were a lot of television meteorologists too that were going out in the field and storm chasing. And so I just kind of pinned it on that, they were experienced meteorologists, but maybe not as much in storm chasing quite as bit. And so I thought that was kind of a unique situation, and that tornado was also uniquely large and rain wrapped, and just pinned it on that. But then the next morning when I woke up, Ginger Z actually informed me that the TWISTEX crew sadly had tragedy had struck with the El Reno tornado. And yeah, just one of the worst days of my life that day, waking up and hearing that news. And it was definitely surreal. And after the El Reno tornado had happened, and yeah, just a terrible experience when such experienced storm chasers as the TWISTEX crew were impacted by that large tornado and lost their lives very sadly. And someone that I look up to, Tim, was basically a mentor figure of mine as well, and a pioneer of storm chasing and of research and of meteorology. Self-taught engineer, and did so much recording data as well as storm chasing, and legendary data sets too. The Manchester F4 tornado in South Dakota back in 2003, he recorded a pressure drop at the surface of greater than 100 millibars. He developed the turtle probes in such an innovative design, kind of taking advantage of the shape and knowledge of the pressure distribution given certain winds with the turtle probes was such an incredible design. And just such a tragic loss for our community overall, and with storm chasing. And and now it seems like storm chasers are definitely getting closer than ever before and getting impacted by these tornadoes. And so you're definitely concerned that tragedy could strike again, for example, this year. So definitely trying to encourage storm chasers to be safe and to always be aware of the direction when they're storm chasing, and to realize that getting close to these tornadoes can certainly be very dangerous.
For those outside the storm chasing community, concerns about overall driver safety led to some questioning whether storm chasing was really necessary, and if regulations needed to be put in place. Kansas Emergency Management Association President Brian Stone called for regulations for future storm chasing. However, that never happened. On June 2nd, using GPS trackers over Spotter Network, storm chasers aligned themselves in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska to spell the initials of the 3 members of the TWISTEX team who died in the El Reno tornado. The Discovery Channel aired a special tribute episode of Storm Chasers on June 5th about the Moore EF5 dedicated to the TWISTEX team. In November of that year, National Geographic's featured cover story paid tribute to Tim Samaras and featured a scientific analysis of the tornado. The next year, at ChaserCon, almost the entire convention was dedicated to the El Reno tornado and the lives of Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Jung. Every speaker at the convention dedicated some time to the lives that were lost on May 31st, from Mike Bettis to Dr. Greg Forbes to Tim Marshall, to the entire convention as a whole. At the convention, an empty table with 3 empty seats was at the convention for the TWISTEX team who lost their lives on May 31st. 2 hours of the convention were dedicated as tribute to the TWISTEX team as a whole. Of course, on Reuter Road East, where the TWISTEX team's bodies were found, a memorial was built dedicated to honor the TWISTEX team. Chasers often visit the memorial and often place down license plates, flowers, and burgers that the TWISTEX team had for good luck. Well, I think it's about time for the conclusion. I mean, there cannot be anything that I'm forgetting about this tornado whatsoever. I mean, what could possibly be left to—
El Reno was an EF5 tornado, and the National Weather Service is a sham for downgrading it.
Let's get this dumpster fire over with. Okay, I know that this is tonal whiplash, but let me get on my soapbox for a second here. I'm sick and tired of El Reno 2013's legacy being boiled down to it being rated EF3. The El Reno tornado was originally rated EF5 with winds of 295 miles per hour based on Doppler radar estimates that caught the wind speeds in the air. That rating lasted for 2 months before in August, NWS Norman went back on that rating and finalized the El Reno tornado's rating at EF3 because the EF scale is a damage scale, not a wind scale. and no damage was found that could correlate the tornado's wind speeds with that of an EF5. It's specifically because of El Reno and to a lesser extent Joplin as to why the EF scale is getting updated. Normally, I don't like to go on rants in these videos, but I need to make it clear, I'm sick and tired of these El Reno is EF5 comments. It's become a meme at this point. If all you can get out of this entire event was that El Reno should be an EF5 tornado, then I seriously suggest you take a hard look at what you just said and put that in comparison to what happened. If you care about a tornado's rating over the fact that 3 members of the TWISTEX team died, then that says more about you than it says about me. I'm not saying that this conversation is stupid, because it's something that can be talked about. In fact, it's what the ASE has been doing for the past few years in order to fix the enhanced Vegeta scale. After a year of doing these videos, tornado ratings have been kind of null and void to me. I care far more about the damage these tornadoes have done to people's lives and what remained afterwards. On El Reno's anniversary, remembering the lives lost is far, far, far more important than some stupid number. Not to mention, they are fixing the scale specifically because of El Reno. So why is it still such a hot topic? If you want a more in-depth explanation about how I feel about this, watch my video on the EF scale that I made back in January. Now that I have finally covered everything, let's wrap this up. 10 years ago, the widest tornado observed on this planet touched down and led to one of the biggest losses in the storm chasing community. The massive tornado, due to its unpredictable nature and unusual behavior, led to multiple chasers being hit. Those who survived were lucky, as 4 chasers specifically weren't. The TWISTEX team died alongside a 4th chaser. The first, and so far only time, where storm chasers have perished in the act. As it seems more frequent than ever that the storm chasing community is fragmented, isolated from the rest of those who are interested in weather, it's more important, now than ever, to look back and remember how dangerous chasing is, and what tornadoes can take away from everyone. It's not just the property, it's the fact that people who mean so much to their fields of work, so much to family and friends, and so much to those who look up to them, can perish doing what they normally do. El Reno 2013 is called one of the most dangerous tornadoes in modern storm chasing history, and it's easy to see why. And while yes, storm chasing accidents do happen, many look back to El Reno 2013 as what happens when everything goes wrong. 10 years later, the memorial site on the rural Oklahoma road still stands. Chasers who come by El Reno visit the memorial and pay tribute to those who were so important to tornado science that had perished 10 years ago. The roads they chased were finite, but the legacy that they have for tornado science is endless. And while some may argue about its rating, El Reno 2013 is much more than a number next to its summary on Wikipedia. It's an event that the chasing community cannot forget, and it's one that I will not forget anytime soon. But as the community as a whole remembers the lives of those lost 10 years ago, I have my own grievances that I would like to express. I've never had the time or ability to express them publicly, but I feel like now is the proper time to do so. I began planning this project as far back as August of last year, knowing that chasers would converge. The plan was to travel to El Reno myself and get interviews. That did not happen. But one of the things I was trying to plan out far in advance was who would be looking after my grandmother while I was in Oklahoma, thinking that she would still be around. But as fate would have it, that did not occur. On January 2nd, 2023, my grandmother passed away at the age of 81 due to complications resulting from a fall on Christmas Day, less than a year since my grandfather had passed. My grandmother, much like my grandfather, wanted only the best for me, and did everything in her power to protect me and give me shelter for when I felt uneasy. She did nothing but support me ever since I was born. She definitely spoiled me, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. Out of everyone who has been supportive of my goals for meteorology, she was one of the most vocal supporters of mine. When my grandfather passed, she only wanted me to live with her until it was necessary that she moved somewhere else, or had someone else move in to take care of her. The original success of my YouTube channel after the Jero video made her happy. Happy that I was expressing my love for weather in a beneficial manner. All she wanted was for me to be comfortable and for me to be successful. A sentiment that she carried to her death. She went into hospice in November after doctors discovered a partially dissected aneurysm on the ascending aorta in her heart. That didn't kill her. Hearing that news tore me apart, and I walked over to her crying like there was no tomorrow, with her assuring me that she would be alright. Assuring that she would live to see me graduate from college. She said multiple times that she wanted nothing more than to see me as a meteorologist. I was told over and over again that I should tell her that I would be fine before she passed. As I saw her the day before she passed, I was left silent, being reminded of how my grandfather looked as he passed, unable to tell her that I would be fine, knowing that I truly didn't know if I would be fine. After her deaths and the resulting months of family nonsense, I had every reason to be skeptical. The grandmother who protected me was now gone. And with that, the place that I called my second home, and the home where my YouTube channel and my job started, is now gone at the time of uploading this. These past few months have been hell, evident by the loneliness that I feel every time I arrive home from college, missing her asking me how my day was, missing watching the news in jeopardy with her and Grandpa. At the time that I have uploaded this, I am no longer at their house after endless fighting by my mother's side of the family, yelling and complaining that I was here to look over the house, and after the lawyers of the estate said I had to move. The house that I love so much will be given to a new family that I hope will feel the love that was shown in this house for nearly 30 years. But I also want to thank my community here for being supportive of me during all of this. My ability to pump out videos as fast as I did in late January and throughout the past few months has been because doing this gives me a purpose of some kind. A purpose to share a love of weather, just like how my grandmother wanted me to. She was more proud than anyone else about the YouTube thing, besides maybe my parents. These next few months will be long and likely treacherous at times, as I begin working on new projects in a new location, and doing this whole adulting thing as I will be working on getting a proper recording area set up with my own internet. I don't know where that future leads me, nor the numerous journeys it entails. But I know for one thing that I'll have the support of my parents and an entire community online to help me push forward. While I know that my grandparents won't see me graduate in the flesh, I know they will be looking out for me the best they can. With this video being planned for so long and being a primary focus of what I hope to accomplish with what I do, I dedicate this video to my grandmother, the most vocal supporter of what I did until the day she passed. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you for giving me a place to stay during COVID and throughout most of my tenure at UNG. Thank you for protecting me for so long. Your boy has grown up so much since I've known you. It isn't the end of what I do or of my journey, but just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Your impacts and influence over my life, alongside the influence Grandpa had, will never be forgotten by myself. And when I see you and Grandpa again, I will try my best not to cry. Thank you. Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa, for everything.